The door clicked shut behind them, and I heard the deadbolt turn from the outside. I stood in the middle of a room that smelled like bleach and something older underneath it, something I didn't want to name, and I understood, in the way you understand things that are too large to hold all at once, that my daughter had just locked me inside a building I had never agreed to enter. I was 67 years old. I had raised her alone after her father left. I had worked 31 years at the county clerk's office, gotten up every morning at 5:15, packed her lunches, driven her to violin lessons she eventually quit, sat in the front row of her college graduation, in the rain, and on a Tuesday in October, she walked me through the front door of Meadow Creek Assisted Living, handed a woman at the front desk a manila envelope, kissed my cheek with dry lips, and left. She told me it was just for a few weeks. A trial period, she called it. Just while we figure out the next steps, Mom. You'll have people to talk to. You won't be so alone. I wasn't alone. I had my house. I had my garden. I had my neighbor Dot, who came over every Thursday for coffee and stayed until noon. I had my cat, Gerald, who slept on the foot of my bed and sometimes knocked my reading glasses off the nightstand at 2 a.m. just to remind me he was there. I was not alone. I was simply old, and my daughter had decided that old was close enough to gone that she could start moving the furniture before I finished breathing. Her name is Patricia. I have called her Patty since she was 3 weeks old, when she first smiled, really smiled, not gas, and grabbed my finger with her whole fist like she was holding on for dear life. I held on too. For 64 years, I held on. I should have seen it coming. Looking back now, I can trace the outline of it the way you trace a crack in the ceiling once you see it. You can't stop seeing it, and you realize it's been there for much longer than you thought. It started after I turned 65. Small things, at first. Patty started asking about the house. Not in a sentimental way, not in the way you ask about a place you grew up in, but in a practical way, a calculating way. What did you pay for it originally? Have you had it appraised recently? Do you know what the neighborhood is going for these days? I answered her honestly because I didn't know yet that honesty was a door I was opening for her to walk through. Then came Marcus, her husband. They'd been married 11 years, and in 11 years I had never felt comfortable alone in a room with him. He had small eyes and a large smile, and the habit of touching things in my house, picking up picture frames, running his fingers along the edge of my kitchen counter like he was already mentally cataloging it all. He called me by my first name, Ruth, from the very first time we met before I had offered it. I noticed. I didn't say anything. I should have said something. About a year before they put me in Meadow Creek, Marcus started coming to Sunday dinners more often. He brought wine I didn't ask for and talked about real estate the way other men talk about sports constantly, and with a kind of hunger that made my stomach uneasy. He mentioned, twice, that a house like mine and a neighborhood like mine was sitting on a gold mine. He laughed when he said it. I didn't laugh back. Then Patty started talking about my health. I was in perfect health. My blood pressure ran a little high, and I had some stiffness in my left knee that my doctor called perfectly age-appropriate. But I was sharp. I was mobile. I drove myself everywhere. I cooked my own meals. I did the crossword in pen. There was nothing wrong with me that a younger version of my daughter couldn't have named without blinking. But Patty started forwarding me articles about falls, about seniors living alone, about the cognitive decline that begins, she said, sometimes years before you notice it. She asked me, very gently, if I'd been forgetting things. I told her no. She looked at Marcus. He looked at his wine. The manila envelope she handed to the woman at Meadow Creek's front desk, I found out later it contained a power of attorney document. Signed in my name. Notarized. I had not signed it. I know my own signature. I have signed my name the same way since I was 19 years old, a looping R, a clean L, the letters of Ruth Lancaster laid down in ink with the same pressure and the same tilt they always have. Whatever was in that envelope, it was not my signature. But I didn't know any of that yet. Standing in that bleach and something else smelling room, while an orderly with kind eyes showed me where the bathroom was and pointed out that there was a television mounted to the wall, I just stood there. And I felt the first real fear I had felt since my husband walked out 40 years ago, because I understood that I had been moved. I had been placed somewhere. I was no longer in my own life. They took my purse at intake. For safekeeping, the woman at the desk said. They took my phone too, that one she called a facility policy. Something about residents becoming distressed by too much outside contact in the first weeks. She said it with a straight face and a laminated smile, and I stared at her and thought, you know exactly what you're participating in. I had $43 in my coat pocket. I had put it there that morning out of habit, the way I always tucked a little cash before leaving the house. Ever since I was a young woman, and my own mother told me, always have bus money, Ruth. Always have enough to get yourself home. She couldn't have known how right she would turn out to be. The first 2 days, I was too stunned to think clearly. I sat in the common room and watched other residents watch television, and I felt the particular horror of someone who has been buried alive, conscious, aware, unable to make the walls understand that there is still someone inside. I ate the food they brought because my body required it, and I slept in the narrow bed because exhaustion doesn't wait for grief to finish. On the 3rd day, I started paying attention. The woman who ran the front desk, her name was Brenda, I learned, because everyone at Meadow Creek wore a name tag, worked a 7 to 3 shift Monday through Friday. The overnight aide, a young man named Tommy, who always smelled faintly of fast food and was visibly bored after 10 p.m., had a habit of leaving the side door propped open when he stepped outside to check his phone. The door led to a parking lot that opened onto Birchwood Avenue, and Birchwood Avenue ran straight east toward the part of town I knew. On the 4th night, I put my coat on at 11:15, tucked my $43 deeper into my pocket, and I walked out. The air was cold and clean in a way that institutional air never is, and I stood in that parking lot for a moment just breathing it. Then I walked to Birchwood Avenue and turned east and kept moving. I walked for about 20 minutes before my knee began to argue with me. I stopped at a gas station, used the bathroom to wash my face and straighten myself out, and bought a bottle of water and a granola bar with $4. The woman behind the counter didn't ask me any questions. I didn't offer any answers. I knew where I needed to go. There was a branch of my bank, First National, where I had kept my accounts for 22 years, about a mile and a half east on Birchwood. I had no ID, but I had my account number memorized, my social security number memorized, the answers to every security question memorized. I had always been careful that way. My mother again. Know your numbers, Ruth. Know your numbers the way you know your face. The branch opened at 9. I sat on the bench outside from 7:40 until the manager unlocked the door, and then I went in and I explained my situation to a young woman named Keisha, who listened with the kind of careful, unhurried attention that I will be grateful for until I die. It took 45 minutes and 2 phone calls to the main verification line, but Keisha confirmed my identity through answers to security questions and the fact that I could describe every transaction on my account going back 3 months. She pulled up my account. She turned the screen slightly so I couldn't quite see it from where I was sitting, but I saw her face change. She excused herself and came back with the branch manager, a man named David who wore a blue tie and looked at me the way people look at someone who has just delivered very bad news. My account had been accessed 4 times in the past 9 days. The balance that morning was $412. 3 weeks before, it had been over $60,000. I am not a woman who cries easily. I didn't cry then. I felt something cold move through me, from the top of my head all the way down, and I sat very still in that chair. And I looked at David and I said, I need to know exactly what was taken, when it was taken, and what documentation was used to authorize it. And then I need to use your phone. He let me use his office phone. The first call I made was to my neighbor, Dot. Dot is 72 years old, drives a 10-year-old Buick with a dent in the rear bumper, and has the organizational instincts of a military general. When I told her where I was and what had happened, there was a silence of about 4 seconds. Then she said, "Stay right there. I'm coming." She arrived in 23 minutes. She brought coffee in a travel mug and a granola bar from her own pantry and a look on her face like someone had personally insulted her. She said, "I knew something was wrong. I called Patty when I hadn't seen you for a week, and she told me you'd gone to stay with a cousin in Florida." "I don't know any cousin of yours in Florida." "I don't have a cousin in Florida." Dot took me to her house. She fed me a real breakfast, eggs, toast, orange juice, and I sat at her kitchen table and ate slowly and carefully and felt the strange, grounding comfort of ordinary food after days of ordinary fear. I took a shower in her guest bathroom and borrowed clothes from her closet, a blue sweater and gray slacks that fit well enough. I looked at myself in her bathroom mirror for a long moment. I looked like a woman who had been through something. I also looked like a woman who was not finished yet. While I ate, Dot had made calls of her own. Her son-in-law was a paralegal, and he gave us the name of an attorney who handled elder law and fraud cases, a woman named Carol Simmons, who had an office downtown and could see me the following morning. Dot also called her own bank to ask, hypothetically, what the process was for flagging a fraudulent power of attorney. She wrote the answers down in her careful handwriting on a notepad shaped like a sunflower. I spent that night in Dot's guest room, in a bed with a quilt that smelled like cedar and lavender, and I lay there in the dark and thought about my house. My house was a 2-story Cape Cod on Merritt Street. I had lived there for 38 years. My husband and I bought it together, and after he left, I stayed, because leaving felt like losing twice. I painted the kitchen yellow when Patty was 12, and she said it was embarrassing, and I told her someday you'll understand yellow. I planted roses along the back fence that took 3 years to really take hold, and then bloomed every June like they were personally grateful. I refinished the hardwood floors myself one summer with a rented sander and a lot of patience. Every corner of that house had been decided by me, paid for by me, lived in by me. I wanted it back. I wanted it back with a clarity that was almost physical. Carol Simmons was a compact woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, and the kind of voice that didn't rise at the end of sentences. Everything she said landed flat and certain, like she had already made up her mind and was simply reporting the conclusion. She listened to everything. She wrote things down. When I finished, she took her glasses off and looked at me directly and said, "What you're describing is elder financial abuse, fraudulent use of a forged power of attorney, unauthorized account access, and potentially unlawful detention." She said it plainly, the way a doctor names a diagnosis. "This is serious," she said, "and it's actionable." The power of attorney document Patty had submitted to Meadow Creek and to my bank was a forgery. Carol confirmed this through a forensic document examiner. She worked with a woman who took one look at the signature and pointed out the slight rightward lean and the hesitation mark in the R that my own signature never had. Someone had practiced it. Not well enough, but enough to fool a rushed intake coordinator and a bank teller who had no reason to look closely. The house was another matter. Marcus, it turned out, had been busy. Using the forged power of attorney, he had listed my house with a real estate agent 9 days after I was placed at Meadow Creek. It had not yet closed. The sale was pending. Carol filed an emergency injunction to halt the sale within 48 hours of our first meeting. I won't pretend the weeks that followed were easy. There were depositions and document requests, and long afternoons in Carol's office going through financial records, while her paralegal printed things and handed them to me with a serious expression. There were moments, sitting in a beige conference room under fluorescent lights, when I felt the weight of it, the specific exhaustion of fighting people you once trusted with your softest places. But there were also other moments. There was the forensic accountant who found in the bank records that Marcus had begun moving money the same day I was admitted to Meadow Creek. Not after a week. Not after they'd waited to see if I'd fight back. The same day, which meant this had been planned before I walked through that door. Probably months before. There was the intake coordinator at Meadow Creek, not Brenda, but a different woman, a supervisor named Helen, who, when presented with a certified copy of my real signature beside the one on the power of attorney document, went very pale and said she would cooperate fully with any investigation. She cooperated fully with the investigation. There was Carol, who had seen 50 cases like mine and lost exactly 4 of them, and who on the morning of the hearing wore a dark blazer and walked into that courtroom like she had already written the ending. And there was Dot, who sat in the gallery every single day, in the second row, with her good purse on her lap and her reading glasses on, even though she had nothing to read. Patty came to court in a gray blazer and pearl earrings. She looked like herself and also not like herself. There were shadows under her eyes, and she sat very still in a way that didn't look like calm. It looked like something held too tight. Marcus sat beside her in a suit that was a little too large in the shoulders, and he spent a lot of time looking at the table in front of him. I wore a navy dress I had borrowed from Dot and a pair of low heels I had bought the week before with money. Carol had helped me recover from an emergency account freeze. I had my hair done the morning of the first day, not for anyone else, for myself, because I had walked out of Meadow Creek in a coat and $43 and I had gotten myself here and I wanted to look like someone who knew exactly where she was standing. Carol presented the case in the same flat. A certain voice she used in her office. She laid it out in order. The forged document. The same-day financial transfers, the nursing home placement without consent, the pending house sale. She called the forensic document examiner, who explained the signature discrepancy with a clarity that left no room in the air for interpretation. She called the bank's fraud investigator, who walked through the transaction timeline in careful, numbered steps. Patty's attorney argued that I had shown signs of cognitive decline, that my family had been acting in my best interest. He called this caretaking. He used the word concerned several times. He said Patty loved her mother. Carol asked the fraud investigator to confirm the date the first transfer was made. He confirmed it. Carol asked him to confirm that this was the same date I was admitted to Meadow Creek. He confirmed it. She didn't say anything else on that point. She didn't need to. The judge, a woman in her 60s who wore her gray hair short and looked at both sides of the courtroom with the same level, unimpressed expression, took 2 days to issue her ruling. The forged power of attorney was declared void. The house sale was permanently halted. The transferred funds, traceable in full, were ordered returned. Patty and Marcus were referred to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation on charges including elder financial abuse and document fraud. I got my house back. I got my accounts back. I got Gerald back. Dot had been quietly keeping him, sneaking him food and pretending not to be attached. And when I came to pick him up, he walked directly to the door and sat in front of it like he had simply been waiting for me to come get him. People have asked me, since then, whether I feel sad about Patty, whether there's grief mixed in with everything else. Yes. Of course there is. She is my daughter. I carried her. I named her. I sat up with her when she was sick, and I drove through a snowstorm once to bring her soup when she had the flu in her first apartment. There is a kind of grief in this that doesn't have a clean name, not for the person she became, but for the person I thought she was, and the relationship I thought we had. But I don't confuse grief with regret. I don't confuse love with what she did. What she did was attempt to erase me, to lock me behind a door and walk away and leave someone else to manage the administrative details of my disappearance. To take the house I painted yellow and the bank account I built, dollar by dollar, across 31 years of early mornings, And to do it all while I was still alive and thinking and standing right there. I think about that sometimes. She didn't wait for me to die. She just decided I was close enough. I am not close enough. I turned 68 last March. Dot brought a lemon cake and we ate it at my kitchen table, the yellow one, with Gerald circling our feet and the roses coming in along the back fence, right on schedule, same as they do every year. I had coffee in my own mug from my own cabinet, and I looked out my own window at my own yard, and I thought, this is mine. I built this. I stayed. My knee still bothers me on cold mornings. I take the stairs a little slower than I used to. I sometimes wake up at 3 a.m. and lie there in the dark and listen to the house, settle, and feel the particular quiet of a place that almost wasn't mine anymore. Then Gerald knocks my reading glasses off the nightstand, and I tell him to cut it out, and he goes back to sleep like nothing happened. I am not close enough, not even a little.